All right, here we are. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. If this is your first time here, welcome. Everyone else, what's up? How is everyone doing? How are you feeling? If you are listening to this at the time of its publication and you live in the United States of America, I wonder, is it just me, or does the feeling of uncertainty and anxiety level around that feel ramped up as we get closer to this election that is upon us? And, we're actually going to talk about some of that stuff next week here on the show, but not today. Because I think in order to try to have conversations about incredibly divisive or challenging topics that often bruise friendships, and there's a reason why there's that cliche of you're not supposed to bring up politics or religion at the family holiday, So in order to be able to handle those situations, at least for myself, I need to get my own internal state in order. I need to feel like I've got a good handle on how I'm responding to things rather than just reacting to everything. And I've often used this expression over the years. I've talked about my yoga practice being a way to develop self-management skills. And what I mean by that is the experience I provide myself in practice is intended to be a behavioral precedent of sorts, a way of establishing a pattern of me being with myself and moving through the world in a way that I would wish to, rather than forever being in some fight or flight kind of mode of just trying to survive, to feel like I get to steer the ship some rather than forever being pulled along. And if you listen to this show on the regular, you often hear me say that all of us will keep our wits about us and that we are managing our stuff. And that's what I mean, that there's an internal process of managing your emotions and responses and your thought patterns and your behavior patterns so that you feel like you're not overwhelmed by everything and you can handle what is before you. Isn't that the definition of stress? When you feel that the demands on you exceed the resources you have to meet them. So what happens with me internally and how I manage my internal states is kind of everything when it comes to that. And I'm always looking for new ways to frame this kind of internal, intuitive process of learning and growing. And my guest today, Jenny Gladding, is someone I met who happened to write a chapter in a book, and the title of her chapter was Self-Leadership versus Self-Mastery. And it kind of struck a chord in me in terms of this internal processing. She's drawing upon a couple of different sources that I don't know a lot about, this internal family systems and some other stuff that she's coming from. And it was just fun to connect with somebody on the internal processes that we go through and how that might relate to our yoga practice and managing the incredible stresses of our world. So it was wonderful to have a moment to connect with Jenny, and I'm very glad to be sharing it with you today. Real quick before we get to it, Let me mention that if you are enjoying the show and you would like to connect with me in other ways, there's certainly opportunities for us to do that. There's ongoing live classes and a weekly discussion group. There's on-demand videos. Or perhaps you would like to become a supporter of this show and get access to the full-length archives by becoming a podcast premium subscriber. You can find all of my stuff at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, y'all. I think we're going to keep it short and sweet, and we'll leave it there. I will touch base with you on the other side, but let's go ahead and get to it. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with Jenny Gladding. Hello?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Hi.
I'm seeing you. Hi.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. You know the deal, I think. I'm recording. We're doing it. We're in it, okay?
Okay.
Well, I think someone listening would already have known, even from the way this started, that we have met before. It's kind of nice for me, honestly, because sometimes this is a cold moment. I'm talking to somebody I've never spoken to before, but you and I have had some interaction in my Sangha, so I feel a little bit more comfortable. It's nice to have this moment with you.
Yes, it is. And I just have to take a moment and say your space is beautiful.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm
really happy for you.
I'm in my third week right now, and it's going pretty good. Today, I had my biggest class yet of 4 people, which is actually the number I have set. If I can get 4 people per class, like on average, out of a room that holds 8, I'm actually doing good. Like I'm in the green, I'm actually making a little money.
Yeah.
So I've had some 3s, a couple of 2s, and a bunch of 1s. Today was my first 4, and I was like, woo.
Yeah. I'm curious about that. I am a curious person.
Please.
So I know you're going to lead the conversation, but I know I've heard you say before that you have kind of moved in the direction of preferring to teach a small number of people.
Well, I don't know if it's just that. I mean, yes, on some level, I think that once you get past a certain size group of people, the dynamic changes or something, or you can't even pay attention. Like my voice has to be projected to a certain different decibel when I'm in a big room with 60 people. I used to set the number somewhere around 12, like anything over 12, it started to feel very different. Yeah. But this is like, 8 people, 9 max in the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is definitely intimate. I don't know if it's that I want to only teach small groups, but I want to teach in person. Right. And the last time I had a yoga center, I had a big room that would hold 40 people and, 42 classes a week and 15 teachers on the schedule, like kind of like a big operation. And it just wasn't sustainable. Even like I had a good run, like 5 to 7 years where I was in the green, but over time with rents and stuff, it was just not possible. So this situation, the small scale of it, it's very specific also to like, can I actually make the numbers work? Like I don't need a lot of people in this space to make it work, which is the whole idea. Yeah. And it's a situation. It's a landlord who's supporting it. It's a neighborhood that maybe wants it. We're going to find out.
It looks really charming.
Well, I'll say one other thing, and then we'll get to the talk. And I don't have to steer it. I'm very happy for you to steer it. That's a load off of me. If you want to take us some directions, I'm happy for you to take us some directions. But what you're seeing behind me is like the entry room. And I
saw all the pictures that you sent in the email.
Okay. So you saw the email to us. So you saw all of them. So, my wife is responsible for all the interior painting. Like she gives me, like options, like here's some choices. And sometimes she'll even override me if she doesn't like the one I pick. But she's got like a degree in color theory. So she's the one who does it. And this room in particular was fun for me because she had a whole other plan. That was this mural that she was going to paint on there. She wasn't going to hang any three-dimensional art. It was just going to be a big mural on the wall. But when it came time to do it, she just wasn't feeling it. And it's interesting because she's usually pretty controlled. Like the last time she painted something for me at a yoga center, she literally projected it up on the wall and then like traced it, was like very controlled. But this time she wasn't feeling good about what she was going to do. And I said to her, listen, I talked with her what this meant to me and what it was about and how I wasn't doing it all. And I was like letting it be guided by somewhere other than like me feeling like I was the master rather than the lead or a leader. We'll get to that, right? That's why you're here.
Right.
So I was talking about that with her and I said, I want you to do whatever feels the most like true or right. And she really challenged herself. And what she ended up doing, as I understand it, is she literally just like came in here, put Nick Cave on and just like freestyled on the walls.
Oh, that's her? That's her
all hand lines that she drew on the wall. Just like, you might think it was wallpaper, but it's not. It's her just going like this. And at first when I saw it, I was like, what is that? I kind of like was a little disjointing because I was like expecting stripes, but it was like this whole other thing. But now I've come to love it. It's like energy waves. It's got all kinds of things going on in there. So she did a wonderful job. I all credit to Audrey, my wife.
Wow. So it sounds like you really were blessed in this life, finding a good partner.
Absolutely. It's one of the smartest things I've ever done is form a relationship and partnership with my wife, Audrey. She's without a doubt like the most honest person I've ever met. So couldn't be more grateful for her.
Yeah.
Well, listen, with all of that aside, let's bring us to, and I kind of referenced it, this chapter that you wrote in this book. And maybe we'll just give everybody the whole story and also a little bit that you maybe haven't heard, which is you sent me an email and you were sort of introducing yourself and you included this book that you have a chapter in.
Right.
And I'm going to admit to you that when I read the name of the book, which is Transformative Leadership, Self-Mastery for the New Voice of Business Success.
I know.
I was like, this is like for CEOs or whatever, But then I did get a chance to meet you and talk some yoga talk with you. And I was like, but why would she send me this if it was just for CEOs? She knows I'm not a CEO. So I did go ahead and read your chapter. And it seemed to have to do not a lot about business, at least not directly. It wasn't like you were talking about how to run a company or be more effective that way. You were talking about something internal and like about people's own personal development. And I assume how that kind of expresses in the way one becomes a leader, whether that's in business or in other things. So I guess my first question is, how do you end up in this book for business?
It's a really good question. It's a good question. I met a woman who is this is a mouthful. She's a quantum manifesting energy philanthropist, and she's studies shamanism. And she studies with a teacher who, is fairly well recognized on an international level. I believe I'm going to get the name right, Jose Luis Stevens. He actually wrote a review on the back of the book. Anyway, the author of the book, Jill Gigi Austin, was in her shamanic studies, year long, taking off on these journeys in Mexico and wherever else. So that's the author of the book, of the project, is someone who had been in business culture, for many, many years successfully, and who had embarked on this transformative journey studying shamanism, and then wanted to gather together people that she knew. Mostly they were CEOs, that was her community, or people who had been involved in marketing in some way. But she also brought in my teacher, my shamanic practitioner, and then that person invited me to have a conversation with her. And I think ultimately she was looking for 24 authors to tell their own personal story, something about how they had a transformative experience where they discovered their own inner capacity to lead. The business part of the title came after I agreed to do the project.
Okay, that's interesting to know. You didn't know it was going to be for business people.
What am I doing? Wait, what is this? So
interesting. But I imagine also like being asked to write that would ask of you to have to kind of synthesize your own thoughts and your own ideas and your own experience, because it was a personal story that you offered.
Right, and they're all personal stories.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing that, let me say the title of your chapter is Self-Leadership versus Self-Mastery, the key to leading with clarity, courage, and heart. Did you write that or did they write that?
No, I wrote that. Okay. That's because then I think I elaborate on that in my chapter, this idea of self-mastery I was poking at a little bit.
Right.
What do we mean by self-mastery? Well, it's kind of sort of comes out of, in my mind, sort of comes out of that Enlightenment thinking influence on Western culture, the sort of, intellectual dominance over whatever body.
Well, we'll get to that. What I would say for me is it actually even struck a chord more recently, even after you and I scheduled this time to talk this week on the podcast, but I recorded it a few weeks ago. I have someone on who's the director from the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram. I don't know if you listened to that episode.
I've been listening to it.
She's great. It's like the tradition I'm most inspired by. It's a great episode. But she did at one point use this word mastery. And she said that she talked about it sort of like the overarching goal or purpose of yoga was about a certain kind of mastery over your mind, or she even talked about like placing your attention and having that kind of focus also being a form of mastery. So like this week or since that conversation, I've been kind of asking the question that you just asked, like, do I consider myself a master of anything? Mm-hmm. And I felt really uncomfortable with that frame.
Yes. So I have begun to get interested in studying tantric yoga. And what my understanding is that classical yoga is more of a dualistic worldview. And I always felt uncomfortable reading, like the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. There's something that bothered me about the language. Obviously, I'm not tossing the whole thing out, but I'm saying that these ideas that bothered me even in studying Buddhism of this kind of mastery over something or a kind of transcending, and I mentioned this in the chapter, that this just didn't resonate with my own experience or my own intuition.
Yes. I would say we've had many conversations on this show about dualism and non-dualism. Okay. I've come to an interesting new place, but before we get into the weeds trying to talk about dualism, non-dualism, even if we're going to do that, the other thing that I did think was interesting about your chapter, one that you were drawing upon like some sources that I have a little bit of familiarity with, but I don't know much about this. What's it called? What was the note that I took? The internal family systems that you reference. And you also talk about like Jungian shadow work. And I did find that to be kind of significant to me because in respect to what you were saying, one of the kind of pitfalls I ran into with a more like transcendent idea was, if I do these practices, I can become a master, which would mean that I don't have to have this suffering in me and whatnot, and I can kind of reach some sort of higher consciousness.
Right.
But I found that the reason that didn't work is I had a bunch of shit to deal with. Like I had a bunch of stuff that needed to be reckoned like with what has happened in my life and my experiences. My curiosity there to you is, you talk about this in your chapter, but maybe you could say something about it here in terms of how you get to this idea of self-leadership versus self-mastery.
Okay, well, so that's not my term. Self-leadership, it comes from the Institute for the study of internal family systems. I mean, let me say that correctly. It's the IFS Institute, Internal Family Systems Institute, founded by Dick Schwartz, who is a psychotherapist. And he, I guess, just really quickly, the story with Dick Schwartz is that he was working, my recollection is that he was working with a population of maybe young women, adolescents who had eating disorders. And he was trained in family systems theory. And what he noticed was that his patients would talk about, parts. Well, there's a part of me that wants to binge eat. And then there's a part of me that has regret or that wants to, punish myself. And so he began to see this model. He says, I didn't create it. It's like it kind of got downloaded to me, So he begins to see this model that internally we kind of have a system of parts, that we're not just like one person at one mind, mono mind, but that we're sort of a multiplicity of parts, and not in the sense of pathologizing it like we have a personality disorder, but that's just the nature of the mind. And so self-leadership in that model is being able to discover, in yoga we call it the true self, right? Our true nature, Buddhist thought, is being able to find that experience in ourselves and allow it to start to grow, to become, that we have more access to it. That's self-leadership.
I get that. And I've heard it described by other yoga teachers that I really respect. I've heard them say that there's many different voices in your head.
Right.
And that there's one particular voice that has a different fragrance than all of the other voices.
Oh, I like that.
And being able to kind of identify that voice and then kind of let that voice take the leadership role to all the other voices.
Yeah. Well, I want to just say that lately, I have some private clients that I coach using this model, but I'm also eclectic. And the way that I kind of sit with people in conversation, I find it so similar to the way I hold space in a yoga class. I'm really not discovering a lot of difference, except that I can work more specifically with a person in a conversation than I can in a class full of yogis.
Okay, well, let's get more specific about that first, before we talk about how doing this other work that you maybe don't call yoga is also just like yoga.
Right.
Let's talk about your yoga background. So when do you first get into yoga? Not that long ago, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I did yoga like sort of in a scattered way throughout my young life. And then I started practicing Bikram. It was called Bikram at the time.
Back when it was okay to call it that.
Right.
Someone emailed me, as a total aside, recently, someone emailed me and they asked me if I knew any trainings that were 26 times 2, 26 and 2.
Yeah, right.
And I hadn't heard that. That's like the new way they call it, the 26 and 2 instead of Bikram, right?
So here's the thing about that experience is that I'm a person who hates to be hot, and I entirely dislike sweat. So how you got me to stay in a room and to go all the time passionately and be utterly hot and covered in sweat is a mystery in itself. But then I went to this studio and I practiced Bikram for 13 years.
But why? Okay, so why, if you hate heat so much, there's clearly something good about it, or you wouldn't have kept going.
Well, who knows? Maybe it's just like
or was that, I hate to bring this up, but you do talk about your dad in your chapter and like a hard relationship with them. And I've had a very hard relationship with my dad. I really related to what you put in there. And I had like a similar experience to that one like dinner you had with him. I had like the same kind of thing happen with me and my dad. But does that troubled whatever inside you have to do with why you were doing that? Because it's a pretty hard system. It's not very loving and gentle and forgiving always.
So it didn't feel like self-flagellation, if that's what you mean. No, It felt like I really started to get that experience one can have. I think I can speak. Well, I'll speak for myself in yoga of like suddenly I'm hesitating to use the word transcendent, but it's like suddenly you feel one with everything. Like you start to just like you're in your body and you're in your sensation and you're like and your breath I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. Like I'm a really passionate yogi, and you're just suddenly like it's a wow. And the class ends and you were like, I didn't notice I was hot. I didn't notice that for me was profound because I hated to be hot and I hated to sweat. And I was, whatever happened to me, I didn't notice that I hated being hot and I didn't notice that I hated sweating.
Interesting. Well, you also write in your chapter that for a good portion of your life, a lot of your pursuits were like more intellectual, and you write like your intellectual seeking, I quoted, shifted to a knowing in the body, which is kind of what you're describing. There's that like more somatic experience rather than intellectual reasoning happening, right? Right.
Yeah. So I got hooked. But then at some point I decided I wanted to build upper body strength, and Bikram is not very big on upper body.
That particular 26 poses isn't the end all. Like it's in my mind, it wasn't always very well rounded. I felt like some of those things weren't right for a lot of people, and there were things that I felt like my body needed that weren't represented there. Yeah. So I decided I wanted to try vinyasa, and I went to a vinyasa studio. Always thought I was a free spirit, right? And here I am practicing in this Bikram studio in front of a mirror, and I'm like just all about making it beautiful, like the perfect expression of the asana. And I'm seeing it, I'm looking at it. And then I go to this vinyasa studio and they show me the yoga room and it's like a box. It's all walls. And I'm just dismayed. I'm like, where's the mirror? And I remember the owner said to me, his definition of vinyasa, that it was more like for the free spirit. It was like free-spirited yoga. So now I was really confused because I'm like, I've not been doing free-spirited yoga. Like, there's a dissonance here. How is it possible that I love this other, I guess, more regimented yoga, and now I'm being told I see myself as a free spirit, that vinyasa is for the free-spirited, and I'm concerned about why there's no mirror in the room. So anyway, with all of that said, I started going, and then I fell in love with that one. I fell in love with that practice. It was power yoga. I see. It was like Ashtanga based, or like, was the teacher being really creative about the sequencing and coming up with flows? Is that the idea?
They had vinyasa teachers. Yeah. So it was like a power yoga studio, and it was really popular. I'm in a college town. You had athletes coming, but I was like, okay, that's a good workout, but that's not really, I'm not in love with it. So then I started taking the vinyasa classes. Then I was in love again. Now I teach in a variety of places. One place has a mirror, and a lot of teachers apparently teach with the students facing the mirror. And often I have to say, like, if I arrive after students are already setting up their mats, I'm like, no, I'm over here. Yeah. I'm not teaching by the mirror, and let me tell you why. Because when I learned to understand who I was, where I wanted to be, what alignment was for me somatically, I guess is the best way I can put it. Without a mirror, that was another moment of transformation. So I teach to that experience.
I think that's interesting. I am not a fan of mirrors. The only time I can make a case for them is sometimes in certain learning environments, like teacher trainings, you could make a case for looking in the mirror to see something. Yeah. But I consider them to be an obstacle often more than a help, because certain things happen when you look at yourself in a mirror that I find to be counterproductive to the kind of sensing and experiencing that I think that you're pointing to in your chapter that I'm most interested in,
Right.
Interesting. Well, all right. So the teacher, at some point you did a teacher training. Was it at the vinyasa place?
It was at I learned Journey into Power.
Journey into Power. Oh, so it's Baron Baptiste. Is that Baron Baptiste stuff?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So here's what I'll say about that. I loved my vinyasa teachers. I didn't resonate with the whole Journey into Power thing, but they said to me, because I was thinking about taking a teacher training, and I was kind of looking around, and a couple of them said, it's great to have the Journey into Power as your foundation. You can you can improvise off of it. It's just a really good, solid foundation. And I listen, I mean, I don't consider myself an expert, but for me, I don't teach the same sequence every week. And if I'm tired and I have a full week, I know something to fall back on.
Everybody's got, I talk about this in my training with folks because there is kind of this idea that you're supposed to like always come up with new stuff. And people know me, I just teach the same thing every time. I just took it off the table because the idea that you're supposed to reinvent the wheel every time you teach a class is kind of silly to me. And even if you are somebody who's not like me, like personality wise, I always make this joke, but like if I go to dinner with my wife, I always get the same thing. And she always says, don't you want to get something different? And I'm like, no, I know what this tastes like. I want this.
Yeah.
She likes to try new things. So there's that in teachers. I know many teachers I love who would feel bored doing the same thing and like to come themes and do all kinds of stuff. And I think it's great to do that. But like you say, if you're going to be consistent and teach like again and again and again regularly over years, there are going to be times when you don't got your A game or your whatever, or certain things are a certain way, situations are in life, and you show up and you do. It's nice to have some classes in your back pocket that you can pull out that are tried and true,
Right.
Well, it's funny, just as another aside, do you know what Baron Baptiste is doing now?
What is he doing now?
I don't know. I tried to get him on the show, but he hasn't returned my email. But he's got like this YouTube channel that's kind of like a coaching thing, but it's like, it's kind of wild. I don't know. It's interesting. He's had some interesting topics on there, but he doesn't seem like he's teaching yoga. He's just got this other thing he's doing. So it's interesting.
Well, here's my curiosity. I've done no research on this, but my impression of power yoga and the kind of language that gets used is that it felt to me like it was influenced by that West Coast kind of like, what was the guy's name? Earhart, that kind of like a landmark. Do you remember like those trainings?
Oh, I know what you're talking about, those trainings. Yeah, but I don't know if that's specific to power yoga. Might be to Baron, but I don't know if it's power yoga. Yeah.
Right. So, but there's like that language, kind of more cognitive, that cognitive language of like, shift your beliefs, shift your experience, like go for the yes, go for the
yes. There's definitely that element that was baked into it, which is sort of like a self-help, self-mastery frame. You know what I mean? Like that was baked into a lot of different yoga classes. Mm-hmm. Often the more popular ones, the fun ones.
Exactly.
So when does that start to change for you? When do you question that self-mastery frame in your own practice?
Okay, so I think I talk about this in the chapter as well. I finished my teacher training, the pandemic hits. I finished my teacher training and let's go back to using parts language, which is the subject of, mentioning Dick Schwartz previously, his model of internal family systems work. There's a part of me that is holding my vision to be like a more expressed version of myself, like someone who's got some we won't use the word mastery, but that I have had some transformational experiences. I'm like living into a higher expression of who I am, what's possible for me. And there are also parts that are like, I'll have to be studying for the next 20 years before I'll be ready to do that, right? So these two kind of experiences are existing in me. And all of a sudden, my daughter says to me, she's working in a fitness center. She says, I told my boss you're a yoga teacher. And then I get an email inviting me to come audition. So I bought myself some time and I started furiously studying. And I started really looking at those YouTube videos with Baron Baptiste. And I started realizing how little I knew and how inadequately, well, I don't want to put it that way. I just think a 200-hour teacher training, you can't get all that you need, right? So I embark on self-study, which is how I found you. You've been a great resource for me. Very grateful for that. I'm like, I just started discovering all these different teachers and learning a little bit about a lot of different areas and approaches to yoga. Am I answering your question?
You are. I guess I'm wondering, like when does maybe I could be more specific, actually, because this is where the question comes from in me, that there's a certain changing of the frame from like mastery to leadership, for just to use that terminology. And maybe we'll come back to family systems theory or whatever. But
Right.
I think that to me, the question is, there's definitely discipline required. Like I have to have discipline to, it's interesting to like, I've needed to be disciplined in order to do the things that you said, to like be the person I want to be or know myself. It's required discipline, but that discipline can be kind of taken too far. And that's when it becomes me trying to become the master.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I know what I'm thinking about. So I've been a reader all my life. Did you ever read the book Zen and the Art of not archery? Zen and the Art of Archery. Sorry, that's
actually
the one.
that was required in my teacher training with
Oh,
Allison West. She loved that book.
Wow, right. I love that book. That book really resonated with me.
Yeah.
The idea that, so there's this formal study of the technique of becoming a great archer. Is it an archer? Is that
it's archery? Yes.
Archer. Okay.
Because there's also Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which is another thing, which is also good. Yeah. But the Zen and the Art of Archery is a different book, and I remember it very specifically because it was significant for me as well.
So there's the discipline of learning this practice, this technique of being a great archer, and then at some point, something kind of mystical happens, if I could use the word. And I remember that the author, Herigel, is that his name? He says that you become suddenly that, the bow and the target, all of it became one. And at some point, you're outside of thinking about your technique. You've practiced and practiced, you've learned a technique, and suddenly you're in a flow. You are in a different experience where things, in fact, are now becoming one. You are in this flow experience. So, yeah, I'm very enamored. Is that possible? I'm very inspired by that whole idea. It probably really resonated with some inner sense of my knowing. So I think that has been a steady thread that maybe has become more visible to me.
How did that class go that your daughter got hooked you up with? How did that go? That was your first teaching experience?
I was the, I must master this. I must be perfect. Oh my gosh. I've got to study yoga every day. I have to, the funny part is that I also have a personal chef business. And I remember saying to them, I'm really busy. I probably can't come audition for a month. Knowing that I needed to buy myself some time. I remember they wrote me back and they went, oh, wow, that is really busy. So
you played hard to get. That probably worked in your favor.
I showed up and I went through all the motions. And then, the lady said to me afterwards, that was really great. And then I remember at some point she introduced me to someone. They immediately offered me a job. And then she introduced me to one of the members at some point, and she said, yeah, she's has years of experience. Well, I have years of experience as a kind of spiritual seeker, but anyway, that was the beginning. And it all was possible because I just kept saying yes. That's the only reason I have continued to move forward. I kept saying yes, and I said yes even when it felt incredibly awkward. And I was going to make mistakes and I was going to lose my words and feel foolish. And I kept saying yes to something that was greater, yes, yes, yes. And then one day I realized whoever I am in the front of the room for an hour, when I'm done, I look back and I say, who is that person? Who is she? How did she get there?
Or I think the other thing that's interesting to me is, there is, like you were saying, when you're talking about Zen and the Art of Archery, there's this effort that you make, this disciplined practice that you might do. But when you're sort of teaching it your best, it doesn't really feel like you're doing it.
Right. It doesn't. It's so wonderful. I think that I wouldn't like to do anything else.
So I guess you could define that as mastery, but we don't like mastery.
Well, because what it implies is that I achieved all of that, and I'm in control of it.
See, that
And
does actually.
I don't want to be in control of it.
See, that actually is what brings us together, because of more recently, I've been having all these conversations about that very thing of like, is there a higher power, and how much of it is like the grace of that higher power that is shown upon you, and what is it that you do that might invite that kind of grace?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
And it is interesting because you use I think one of the things that was appealing is you're using all this languaging that seems to try to avoid a lot of the trouble I get myself into when I talk about God or Jesus or whatever.
So I have no trouble with that language. I mean, it's pretty complicated or burdened. Those are burden terms, and in our culture.
Yeah.
Listen, I grew up with a mother who I actually studied religion at UVA, University of Virginia. And I would, perhaps before that time, I was starting to, in my writing, academic writing, I kept talking about God. And my mother would always say, "What does that mean? What do you mean? What does that mean?" Mm-hmm. She calls herself the Doubting Thomas, not because she wasn't a deeply spiritual person, but because the language is fraught. And so anyway, I think those terms are meaningful to you. They're meaningful to you. So that's what matters.
I guess the point for me is coming back to family systems theory or internal family systems, because I do know I have a friend, Dawn, who studied that. Shout out to Dawn. I know she'll listen to this. And Dawn will have to come on because she could talk about this stuff too. But I guess what I noticed was it did seem like that source that you were drawing upon was essentially communicating kind of what you're saying, but it was using certain languaging that maybe doesn't fall into the same traps that I've been falling into.
I realized the other day when I was starting to say this to you earlier, IFS is a model, right? A model is as good as it points us somewhere. It's a sign that, helps us maybe to work with something, it's like just like a map. It's like tells us how to get somewhere, but it's not the there that we're getting.
It's not the territory. It's the map, but not the territory, right?
Right. So I recognize it's a model, and I recognize the language. Sometimes it's not that resonant for me, but when I'm sitting across from someone, often in a Zoom conversation, in a Zoom room, something else is happening. It's very similar to what's happening for me in a yoga studio. That whatever I'm, what you would call it, channeling. I mean, that's also perhaps
talk about some loaded language. There you go.
My daughter always says to me, "Oh, you're channeling. You're channeling." Let's just put it on her. My 26-year-old daughter says I'm channeling when I talk about what's happening.
I know I have a 14-year-old, and she's always like, his aura is so strong, and they're using those terminologies in different ways than I've come to understand them a lot of times.
So it makes me a little nervous, but I think maybe I've heard it so much that so I'm holding it lightly. Let's put it that way. I hold the term lightly.
Fair.
But it's IFS for me is an effective kind of a model to get into a relationship with someone, to get in connection with someone, and to have a way of practicing connecting with my own, what they call self-energy. We call that your true nature from a Buddhist perspective, or true self from a yogic perspective. Like becoming acquainted enough with my own internal experience that I kind of can recognize when a voice that's talking is kind of more of a regressed part of me, and when it's sort of that more deeper centered, timeless sort of knowing part. Is that fair? Is that language? Okay?
No, I get it, because that is, I really relate to it, because for me, it always was just kind of an intention and a desire to want to be a good yoga teacher, to want to help, to be helpful, to facilitate a clarity and truth in myself and a peaceful cohabitation, and in the pursuit of wanting to do that, it required what you just said, that internal shadow work or whatever.
Yeah.
You can't just meditate your way to it.
Right.
There's some kind of process, depending on how you think of meditation, of being able to kind of sort through some things internally with yourself, because doing that is what facilitates that experience of it, of the channeling or whatever we're calling it, right? Like in order to kind of create the conditions for that, what feels like true, important exchange between you and others, where something valuable feels like it happens between you.
Right.
You have to kind of sort through stuff in yourself and kind of have that conversation with your dad at some point, right?
Okay, now I'm regretting that I used the word channeling. I don't even know what that means.
Fair. Let's think of a different word.
Yeah, I don't even know what I mean by that. Because it kind of...
Well, here's what I'd say. Sometimes the way I framed it...
a dualistic kind of like,
what I would say is sometimes I have framed it as there's an intuitive process that happens in teaching. And so there's a lot of times where something takes over and you're not having to be consciously making choices, but it's all coming based on your experience leading up to that, and potentially something else, something bigger than you at play.
I hope so.
I know, but that bigger thing at play is where everything can get kind of crazy. Although I don't know that it matters so much. I think the point that I'm kind of looking at, which I thought was significant about your bit, was that in order to facilitate that process of intuitive exchange or transformative experience, it can't happen abstracted from like your emotional and your upbringing and like all that stuff. Because I feel like I've wanted to get away from Western psychoanalyzing myself and just get to Eastern mysticism. But I am a Westerner and I have a relationship to my dad, and that has shaped me and how I relate to myself and other people. And it did require me to have to kind of deal with that. And there's a process of doing that. You share that in your piece.
Is your dad the tool or with my father?
No, I was thinking specifically of like that conversation you had with your dad. Did your relationship change with him after that conversation? If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.